Hi, it's Sunday, September 21st, Saturday the 20th in the Atlantic. We've got our same three systems active in the tropics today, and our primary focus is going to be on Typhoon Ragasa, Philippine named Nando in the Philippine Sea. But I briefly want to touch on the other two systems that we have active, starting off here in the North Pacific with Typhoon Neoguri, likely super typhoon by this point. And this is a beautiful tropical cyclone to look at. We talked about a couple of days ago how the system would likely be very picturesque on satellite when it's peeking out here in the subtropics, and we certainly got that today. We can see the eye is now very circular and very clear, and the CDO, the thunderstorms surrounding that eye immediately, have also gotten more symmetric surrounding that eye throughout the nighttime hours into this morning, highlighting that the system is likely of extreme intensity, of now super typhoon intensity. And the Joint Typhoon Warning Center currently has this as a strong typhoon, not super typhoon yet, but they have it reaching that in fairly short order, getting close to that Category 4, Category 5 threshold if you're following the Saffir-Simpson hurricane categories here. But regardless, very powerful typhoon, and fortunately for this peak, it's staying in the middle of nowhere, impacting nobody, and really the only impact we may see is in some of these islands further west is maybe some higher surf as it churns up the ocean out here. But beyond that, nothing too much over the next 5 days. There is still some uncertainty on if it's going to fully recurve out to sea or if it's going to try and deviate west in the long-term part of this forecast, but that's still pretty far out and still highly uncertain. So we have no reason to speculate over that right now, which is something to watch over the next few days. We've also got Tropical Storm Gabrielle in the now central Atlantic. The system has been getting better organized throughout the day. Today, we've had a couple of recon planes flying through the system today, finding that it's getting better organized and trying to form an eye and eye wall structure, which will likely lead to it becoming a hurricane in the next, say, 12 to 18 hours. And this system is now moving into an environment that is better suited for this kind of development. We can see outflow expanding off towards the north, indicating some decrease in some of that vertical shear. There may still be some persisting southerly shear because we do have this upper level low sitting here off to the west. But as we go in time, the flow around this upper level low is getting aligned with the way the storm is tracking. And so that will likely help the system develop more into a hurricane as we go throughout the rest of this week and into early next week. And the forecast for track has really not changed all too much for Bermuda. The system is still forecast to recurve pretty sharply, staying east of the island, and you can see that here in the forecast, making that curve by Monday afternoon and staying well east of you all. And really the only impact you might see is some outer bands from the system that might be capable of bringing tropical storm force winds, but you can see in the probability forecast from the Hurricane Center that's still only about a 20 to 30% chance at this time. And really the strongest impacts are going to be, like I mentioned yesterday, weighted onto the eastern side over open ocean, impacting really nobody. Now, there is another part of this forecast we do need to discuss briefly, and that's the end of the forecast period, as we have seen some model shifts over the past day, now to keep Gabrielle a little bit more south towards the 5-day forecast time frame. As you can see in this forecast now, instead of going far northwest of the Azores, we're now coming further south here, pretty close to the Azores Islands, and this is still a pretty fluid forecast, so things are still subject to change on this, but now Gabrielle is certainly something to monitor in the Azores as we go into the latter half of this week, and it's possible now that we do have the system in a fairly close proximity to these islands, and it will likely still be a tropical storm by that point, so we could have some strong gusty winds and heavy rainfall as the system comes through. And we'll watch the trends on model guidance over the next few days, but just some to monitor right now over the next few days. And we'll talk about that more in detail later when it becomes more solid of a forecast. But for today, we're going to focus primarily on Typhoon Ragasa, a Philippine named Nando in the Philippine Sea, as the system has rapidly intensified over the past day. When I made my video yesterday morning, the system was just getting to typhoon intensity, and now we're very likely close to a super typhoon by this point with the storm. We've now seen it, if you're going by Saffir-Simpson categories, we've seen it come from a Category 1 to a Category 4 in the past day, and we have seen the intensity the intensification rate slowed down over the past several hours, there does appear to be some slight northerly shear. One telling sign of that potential is if you look at all the deep cloud tops surrounding the center, it is heavily weighted onto the south side, which is typically an indicator of some slight northerly shear. And there also may be some clouds seen here, maybe better seen in water vapor imagery here, that may be being pushed to the south. But overall, this shear layer, from what I can tell on modeled soundings, is pretty thin, and this is forecast to abate as we go throughout the next 12 hours. So after that point, it seems like this storm is going to be really up to its own structural integrity to intensify as much as it can. And the waters, like I've talked about for the past several days, have been virtually untapped in this part of the Pacific this typhoon season. So really, the MPI here is very high, and in all likelihood now we're going to be seeing the system at an extreme intensity when it comes through the Luzon Straits here north of the Philippines. And you can see how this may look if we look at the HASS model, which is a higher resolution typhoon model, so we can look at these systems in greater detail. And this is out to Monday morning local time, and you can see this is an extremely powerful super typhoon directly over these islands. And we have seen over the past day the uncertainty has shrunk with the track forecast. We're no longer expecting this to have any significant interaction with the northern Philippines nor southern Taiwan, and unfortunately that means that these islands are probably going to feel the full fury that this eye wall has by the time it's coming through. And models are in pretty much unanimous agreement that this will be a super typhoon by the time it comes through. And that certainly seems likely, given that we're already near that intensity right now, and we're not even to really the peak conditions for the system's intensification. So an extreme typhoon seems likely here, and extreme impacts seem likely as well for these northern islands especially. You can see on this forecast from Ragasa becoming a super typhoon later today and intensifying beyond just the minimal threshold to becoming a very, very powerful super typhoon by the time it comes through here. And that will have the threat of intense winds that are likely to be, catastrophic in nature. Winds at this strength of a super typhoon typically are catastrophic in nature, but also a big issue could be the storm surge along these islands, as islands like this tend to be more susceptible to the full fury of the eye wall of these storms. So that means they can feel much worse storm surge than a locked-in landmass would in comparison. So you can see on this forecast from Pagasa, we could have storm surge over 3 meters across all of these islands north of Luzon. And for the northern coast, we could see a significant 2 to 3 meter surge along the northern coast of Luzon. And this is life-threatening values. And if you're in the northern islands and you have not evacuated and you've been told to, now's really the last day to do that, as starting this time tomorrow, conditions are going to be rapidly deteriorating. And so if you need to finish up preparations and evacuate if you were told to, you need to do that today. And for the northern Philippines, I don't imagine, especially inland areas, that evacuations will be ordered, but typhoon force winds are likely along that northern coast of Luzon. So preparations there for those winds also need to be rushed to completion today. And we do already have signal 2 warnings in place for the islands further north and for northeastern Luzon. And for the rest of mainland Luzon, signal 1 warnings. And these will continue to get upgraded as we go in time. Pagasa does continue to mention that we will probably need signal 5 warnings issued for these islands as the eye wall of the storm comes through. And that is the, of course, highest warning that they have to offer. That is typically issued, I think, for only super typhoon cases. So extreme impacts are incoming in all likelihood, unfortunately, for these islands. Now, beyond this point, the system will be entering the South China Sea, and you can see on this forecast it gradually comes off of that super typhoon peak as it approaches the south coast of China. This is due to structural changes as the system evolves with time. It will likely be getting larger as we go further into the forecast, but also the water, the warmth that the water has does not extend to as great of a depth just off the south coast of China. So the system will likely be able to upwell cooler waters pretty fast off the south coast, and that may also contribute to some weakening as it approaches the coast. But that's not going to be in any way a rapid weakening event. This will still likely be a very strong typhoon by the time it comes to southern China. And the problem with this kind of a track that we're seeing on this forecast is that even though it's not making a direct landfall in Hong Kong, for example, it's passing very close. And again, the storm, it's already quite large. You can see with the wind field size here, but it may get even larger as we go in time through our replacement cycles. And that means that a lot of water is going to be pushed up along the south coast in southern China, really along the entire coast until it makes landfall. And so that could lead to very significant storm surge inundation along this entire coast, even if the system never makes landfall along parts of these coastline here in southern China. Now, once it makes landfall, it will begin to weaken very significantly because of land interaction, and really beyond that point, rainfall would become the bigger issue here as it continues tracking west towards northern Vietnam, though there is some track uncertainty here. Some models want it to come further north and make landfall near Hong Kong. Some are further south and keep it over the South China Sea longer. This could pose a threat if it's further south as a stronger storm to Hainan later down the line. So there's still some uncertainty to work out here in the forecast by this point. But again, the key message is a very strong typhoon is likely to be in the northern South China Sea as we head into the mid to latter half of this week. And preparations should be underway for the system along the south coast of China as it continues tracking west and approaches you all. And of course, I'm going to have more videos on the system as it continues tracking west. But for now, that's all I've got on all of these systems. Stay safe in the Philippines as the system comes through, and I'll have my next video on Ragasa tomorrow. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.